Good afternoon. How are you all doing today? I am Shanika Wingfield, and this is, and we're looking at two different cameras because we are doing the training on YouTube Live and our training page, the Whole Child Facebook training group. So if you see us looking at both cameras, that is why. And so let's just introduce ourselves as people are getting the notification. Sometimes, with trainings, you take a little bit to get on. So just work with us as we just get these things started. This is the Whole Child Development, Discipline, and Destiny Training Part 1. Part 2 will be next Saturday. And if you guys are ready, get your books ready, your manuals ready. And please feel free to write in, take notes. I think it's going to be great. And then I want to make sure everybody can hear me okay, hear Reggie okay. And then we are going to get started in a few minutes. You have something to say, Reggie?
You guys hear okay? If you would type in the comments, let us know that you guys can hear us and see us. We want this to be a pleasant training experience for everybody.
Absolutely.
Yes, and so I think it's important to be able to hear and see. Okay.
No, Jermaine, you cannot share because this is a private training, a private paid training. So you can definitely share the flyer. If you want to share the flyer and just say how awesome the training was, and you guys need to register and get in on part 2, that's absolutely okay. We can do that. So no, you cannot share from the private training group. But again, you can share the flyer. If you benefited from the training today, please get on the Whole Child Facebook page and say how you enjoyed. Even on Amazon, please review the manual on Amazon. So those people can get the manual and then they can seek us out for the training. Like I said, this is just the first installment of many. We have many topics like childhood trauma, bullying, triangulation, manipulation. We have we have a myriad of trainings, of other installments that we are going to train on. I think this is, both of us have been in this field for a combined almost 40 years. And so I'm going to give just a few more minutes because I'm looking at the numbers because I know how many people registered. But again, if you are connected, if you've registered and you are connected on Facebook or you subscribe to our YouTube channel, thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. And we will get started. Everybody can hear in just a second. So get your manuals, get your favorite pen, get you a highlighter, get your coffee, your tea, your soda, your water, or whatever.
And it's real out here in these Corona streets, and so get you a beverage, get you a nice little snack, as my wife was saying, and we just want to just impart into you some amazing things that we've learned over the course of our 40-year tenure combined. Lord, I feel very seasoned when I say that out loud. But I think it's important to be able to. It's good to have education. It's good to have formal training, but I feel like it's reinforced and it's even better when you have the experience to back it. And I say this all of the time that people with any training regimen, with any training environment, whether you're on a job, whether you're wherever you are, there should always be a training process. And that training process only prepares you, I feel, partially to do what you're going to do over time, because the training is not going to prepare you for every scenario, but I feel like it'll equip you and prepare you well enough, especially with your hands-on experience, in order to be able to maneuver through and be able to be successful. So the goal of this training, one of the goals of this training, one of the things my wife and I, we would like to accomplish is to give you some tools that you have not thought about otherwise, and to adequately prepare you as kids get older, they get more manipulative. As kids get older, they test the boundaries a little bit more, at least in my professional opinion. And so we want to help you transition to be able, one of the goals is to be able to kind of help you transition as they transition. Because if you're not adequately prepared with no one really likes transition, especially when it's subtle, especially when it's unannounced, right? But I feel like when you have the knowledge to kind of the knowledge to kind of maneuver through that process, it makes it better for you, and it makes it better for those around you who are transitioning.
Absolutely. And before we get started, we're just going to tell you just a little bit about who we are, and then we'll get into the training. I know sometimes that is very necessary in a training, not to blow or goad about what we're doing. It's just people need to know how are you qualified to teach or train. And so I'll start with myself, and then I'll let my husband take the reign. But growing up, I really thought I wanted to be a juvenile criminal defense attorney. That's what my in counseling was my. So wait a minute, let me say this: teaching, counseling, and a juvenile criminal defense attorney. I wanted to do that growing up, and so I knew I would always go into the field dealing with some type of family, adolescents, children, and those things. And so I have a bachelor's degree in criminology from Kansas State University. My emphasis was on family and children development, protection, and safety. And then I have a master's in human services, marriages and families. And I counseled for many years. I worked at Child Protective Services of Texas for many years. We've always been in the child development, protection, safety, counseling field. And I'm almost completed with my doctorate in educational leadership. And so with that, since I've been literally 18 years old, I've always had a hand in dealing with at-risk youth, tutoring, counseling, mentoring, those types of things, and not just with the youth, but with the entire family. That's why the training manual is called The Whole Child, because you can't just train, counsel, mentor the child and not put the parents in, not implement the family. It is a cohesive unit. And so with that, also, we have together 4 beautiful children. And so what we're training on, what we teach on, we have implemented ourselves in our own family. We see what works, what does not work. We go with things that work. We throw out the things that do not work. And so with that, as we have grown up, we know that our parents only did a number of things, sometimes just 1 or 2 things in discipline or talking or those things. And we just know that just doesn't work in these days, in these times. We have a myriad of variable issues that our children and our families deal with. And we want to give you the tools to help you, whether this is a refresher course, whether you are a new-time parent, whether you are a social worker, an investigator for Child Protective Service, or whatever area, a police officer, whatever area you are in. I believe this training will help you just kind of brush up, refresh, and then just give you some new tools in your toolbox. So tell us about you, Reggie.
Well, I kind of stumbled across the criminal justice field, and I always like to tell people, I did 15 years in the military, and I was on active duty, and then I was transitioning from active duty, and I was looking to go work in a field. I didn't really know particularly what I wanted to do at that moment, and then so I stumbled across a facility that housed young men, boys, and in this facility. To say the least, it was very chaotic that day. I stumbled in, and I walked in the door, and I heard cursing, and I heard screaming, and I heard yelling, and I'm like, oh Lord, do I really want to put myself?
We have some stories to tell you about that.
Yes. Do I really want to subject myself to this level of challenges or craziness, to say the least? And I walked in, and I heard that I was almost on the verge of walking back out, but I'm glad I didn't. I went through with the process, filled out the application, and ended up staying there for almost 9 years. And but I'm saying that to say, my wife and I, as she stated previously, I've grown to have a love for children. I've grown to have a love for families. And in my 20-year tenure, I'm going to write a book about all of the crazy experiences and some of the funny things that we saw and heard throughout the course. I cannot make this stuff up. I've been telling myself, once it's said and done, that I was going to write a book. But so 20 years, I started out working in a facility that transitioned kids that were dealing with long-term commitments, whether it be, to put it in perspective, like juvenile prison, kids that were court ordered, that were mandated to serve long sentences ordered by the court. And upon completion of that sentence, they were sent to the facility, the first facility that I worked with, and then they would transition from there. So instead of having them serve long sentences and transition directly back home, they was like a pit stop there at the facility, the all boys facility, and they could be there from 90 days to six months to a year. It just kind of depends upon how long it took them to transition. From there, my wife and I moved to Texas, where she began to do child protective services. And then I stumbled upon working for the county, Tarrant County in Fort Worth, Texas, working at a juvenile detention facility. This facility warehoused kids who were doing more short-term sentences. It was like an in-between point for them to go to transition from there to a longer-term type facility. I did that for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. Transitioned to Florida for a boot camp there in Florida, and I did that for about 3-4 years. So I have a very a wide range and a myriad of experiences working with children and families, and let me say this: after all the years, many years of working with children and families, I think it's important to know that they just need some guidance. They just need some leadership. They just need to be encouraged, and I think that's one of the most rewarding things that you can do working in this field. So this is our training, our first training that we're excited about really teaching you and giving you some of the tools in order to be effective in working with children and families. I believe that you have to be able to identify what the pressing issues are. So I'm gonna transition that thought to my wife, and then we're gonna jump into the training.
Yes, and let me say this: Reggie has a criminal justice degree, and then he's almost completed with his master's in theology. Excuse me. And we also pastor a church in Charlotte, North Carolina. So that's just a little bit about our experience, our academics, and so, like I said in the beginning, the whole child developed because we have been in this field for so many years, and then also that we have found that a lot of family members, a lot of parents are just, they have exhausted their tool belts and their skill belts, and that they need some new things in there. And so we want to offer that to our families, and then also understand that the whole child is so important: development, discipline, and destiny. And we always, like in the manual, if you stay firm, firm, and consistent with your children, they will grow up and do great things. And we, even in the manual, it says we raise our children to lead. And so many people have in their mindset that they're raising their children inside of their homes to stay in their home. So we have to always consistently prepare them for adulthood in whatever stage that is. We have the ages of our children are 11, 8, 6, and 2. And so we are constantly teaching them, preparing them for transition outside of our home. So everything that we're teaching them, they have to be able to do in their school, at the park, in the playground, in the mall, or wherever they are. It's important because we raise them to leave. We do not raise them to stay with us. And so it is important that we raise them holistically in all areas. And so, did you want to say? Go ahead.
And along that thought, before we dive into that, I want to kind of get a feel. My wife and I would love to get a feel of anyone. If you would type in the comments, do us a favor. Anyone who is currently in the criminal justice field, or have worked social services field, or have worked in some type of form or fashion in any type of capacity of working with children and families, we would like to know who you are so we can kind of see our audience and see and just really be able to relate and to be able to speak some of the same languages, because I think there's a certain language associated with children and families. As we dive into this training, you're going to be able to relate to a lot of things that we're saying.
And if you don't understand a word or something that we typically use in our field, please let us know that as well. And then also send your questions. If you feel comfortable with putting your questions in the comment section, do that as well. If you want to private message us or send an email, please do that as well. We'll get back with you quickly. And so, like I said, it's important, even, and I didn't say this in the beginning, but we need to always train. We're always training. We're always learning. I don't believe anybody has arrived yet, even with parenting. We are always seeking new alternatives to help our children. And so I think it's important, even with our job, I didn't even say, I guess I didn't even say what I did. So as a part-timer, I'm an independent contractor. I'm a certified adoption investigator for a company called NYAP, National Youth Advocate Program, and we have a master contract in South Carolina with the Department of Social Services. And so what I do as a family engagement coordinator, I would go and have meetings with families whose children came into DSS custody within 24 hours. And then we also, within 30 days, had a full family group conference with their family and friends and supportive neighbors, church members, or what have you. And then as a certified investigator, I go to the homes of friends, families, neighbors who are going to be kinship placed. The children will be kinship placed with those people. So I'll go and investigate those homes. I think it's very important because I know as a certified investigator that I have to do continual training every year to have my certification. I'm certified in the state of South Carolina to relinquish parental rights. I'm certified in South Carolina to do adoption investigation and do investigations for kinship placement. I think that's important. And so because I know there's a lot of you that are on here that are social workers in DSS in South Carolina, and we thank you so much for joining us, and for the Foster Parent Association of South Carolina. I know many of you are on here is doing that as well. And so, like I said, society has taught us that, if we raise our children in these affluent neighborhoods, in these best bringing favorable opportunities and conditions, that those will be the best children. And that's not always necessary. That's not always the truth. If you develop and raise your children in the whole child with the mindset we're raising them to be adults, then I think teaching them will be better. I think it would be a lot less stressful knowing that I'm not raising them and training them to live in my house, but I'm training them to leave the home. So one of the quotes, if you can go with me on page 5, one of the quotes in the beginning, development, raising them to lead, is raising your children to lead the nest is the most productive part of development. You will be able to teach them to make wise decisions as children, then use that wisdom into adulthood and realize you did an amazing job. I think that's so important, because if they can make wise decisions as children, then they will make wise decisions as adults.
Absolutely. I think I use this analogy, the baby bird, when the bird is at the proper, at the proper stage to leave, the mother bird oftentimes pushes them out. And I think it goes a little deeper, even with humans and people, because every time, if, like my wife said, if you raise your children right, they'll be productive adults. There is no magic potions, or there is no one way to do this. You guys all heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And I believe that children should be subjected to diverse ways of how discipline, or how people initiate discipline upon them, so that it can, in essence, what we're doing is we're setting them up to be versatile. We're setting them up to really learn different ways and different strategies of how that everybody, what we're teaching them is social. We're socializing them to know that everybody's not the same. Everybody doesn't think the same. Everybody doesn't, use the same forms of discipline and punishment. But I'm saying all of that to say it's important, as my wife stated, to raise your child to leave the nest, because all of that wisdom, all of that blood, all of your blood, your sweat and tears is going to prepare them for them to be able to impart some of that same wisdom into people that they may have contact with.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you guys are paying attention now, but I come from an area of development protection, and he comes definitely from the area of criminal justice, because currently he's an intake supervisor for the Department of Juvenile Justice in the juvenile probation department. So that's what, if you see that while we're training, how we'll come from two different areas. Hopefully we don't confuse you, but I think you will get a holistic training. And so we're going to start on page 7 with the womb. So please take notes. I mean, like I said, even if this will be helpful for somebody else that you know who's currently pregnant or expecting their first, second, third, fourth child. I mean, all pregnancies are different. And we say from the womb to birth, because the condition of the parents when the baby is conceived prepares them for their future outside of the womb. It's so important that whatever you're going through, you're dealing with, that you're cognizant of what is happening while you're carrying a child. They can hear everything, they can feel everything. And so it's important, beginning at 8 weeks in utero, the fetus can hear sounds. So we have to understand that that is literally the beginning of development for our children. Just a couple of days ago, there was a lady on Facebook who was asking, can you put an infant on a schedule? And I kid you not, maybe 9 out of the 10 women was like, no, they're infants. And then I came with my experience. I said, absolutely. And you know why? Because with all 4 of my pregnancies, the baby that was inside of my belly was on my same schedule. I woke up around 7:30, and I ended my day around 5. I typically go to bed around 8:30, 9 o'clock, sometimes 9:30. And our children are still on that same schedule, because that's the schedule that I was on in during the pregnancy. So it's so important that we are taking our pregnancies very important, and I know that you do. So, but important enough to know that what you're doing in your everyday life even affects the baby inside. And so with cognitive functions also can be affected by drug use, tobacco, alcohol use, all of those things. As our doctor tells us, make sure you don't drink, smoke, do illegal drugs, all of those things, and even taking some medications. We know that can affect the baby's inside.
And let me say this, it's important to know that oftentimes I feel like one of the parents' greatest frustrations is they feel like their children can't do it. They feel like, when it starts when you are when the baby's young. If you train them up, when they come out, like my wife said, I feel like it was a smooth transition for them, because that was her schedule. Mm-hmm. And she it was better for us, especially when we were bringing multiple children into the picture. Mm-hmm. It made it a smooth transition for everybody. But I think it's important what you do when you're pregnant before you give birth is going to reflect what happens after the child is here. And so I feel like that'll help you not be as stressed, because new babies, it comes with new responsibilities.
Absolutely, and we'll get to that even more in a second. So yeah. Personality traits are determined in the womb. So, of course, you'll get half of mom, half of dad. And depending on how they come out and depending on what was going on, they'll be more like mom, more like dad. The quote here says there are certain aspects of a mother's and father's behavior, both before and after conception, that produce lifelong consequences. That is so important. I remember with our first child, Azariah, I think I cried a lot during our pregnancy. And so he is very sensitive. Now I'm already sensitive, and so he's very sensitive. And because I cried a lot, and so now the consequence of me crying a lot during pregnancy for whatever, not just the normal hormonal emotional issues, but it was just a myriad of crying. So now in our everyday conversations with him, weekly conversations with him, it's always how to manage your emotions. And so although I cried a lot, and then he's very sensitive, he cries. And so it's okay for a man to cry. It's okay for a boy to cry because he's a young man. However, we have to teach him emotional management. We have to teach him to be sensitive, but also manage it. And so that's a part of, I mean, that's a consequence of what happened while he was in my belly.
As a male, it's a little bit different how I was raised versus how my sisters were raised, and culturally it depends upon whatever your culture, and different things of that nature, that men are not supposed to cry. I feel like my wife and I give our son a very good balance, and because he can articulate to us, and he was able to articulate to us even at a very young age that he could distinguish what was an appropriate emotional response versus what was inappropriate. And he could literally, we would ask him, and my wife in her investigation skills interrogate him and ask, basically just to challenge him to say, to have him cognitively understand why it's important, when it's important and when it's not too important to cry.
Absolutely. And so, like, just give you a few more examples, and then we'll go on to the next point. With the rest of our children, our daughter JL, while she was in my womb, she would cross her legs like a little lady, and so we constantly talked to her. We have sonogram pictures of her constantly crossing her legs as a little lady, and we constantly talk to her about that. She's definitely has my social, outgoing personality, but she is a silly rabbit, just like her daddy, and loves to eat just like her daddy. And so it's really funny. And then I also got my master's with her. So she's very high, and all of our children are highly intelligent. And she's in, JL is in gifted classes in school. And so with our third, Reggie the second, I mean, this kid has so much wisdom as a 6-year-old. It's like, and then I'm trying to think that I must have tapped into the wisdom pool while I was carrying him, and alongside with, I think that's when you were doing your master's as well for theology, when we were pregnant with little Reggie. So he got all the wisdom, and he displays it all the time. And then with our fourth, when I tell you this is our freedom baby, we conceived him in just full freedom, totality freedom of our marriage and where we were. And that's exactly his personality. He's social, he's loving, he's sensitive, he is a clown, but there is such a freedom around him. And so if we never made the distinction, it's like, oh my gosh, when I was carrying these babies, when he was loving on these babies while they were in my belly, their personalities were developing right before our eyes. And so with the next point is, words have power even in the womb. We spoke these things. I literally had JL in my belly, and then on a boppy pillow, breastfeeding her while I'm typing up 20-page reports. 20-page papers for my master's. So it was like she was born in 2011, October 2011. And I got my master's in September of 2011. It was just, and then I was working towards another one. I started my doctorate program with little Reggie. And so, of course, the mother's overall health, the father's overall health, and engagement. We cannot forget that. We cannot neglect that, because yes, we do, majority of the work. We're carrying the baby. The baby's developing inside of us. But the engagement of the father starts while the baby is in utero, starts while the baby is in the womb. Can you speak on that, your engagement while I was pregnant?
It's important. And I feel like I think it's important to know that, like, some of the barriers, before I address that, some of the barriers that would hinder that process of going forth is like the mindset. Some people have very traditional views of relationships and marriage and what have you, but and I feel like that sometimes can interfere with the engagement component. And so, but let me say, my wife and I, we've always kind of developed this sense of, we're going to do things together. As we're a team. Team Wingfield is our motto. And so I think it's important to believe that, though I have a somewhat traditional view, my views are not so rigid that I can't, mop a floor. I can't, clean a poopy diaper and talk to our children and all of those things. So I think it's important. The engagement of the father piece is so critical, because, working with the Department of Juvenile Justice, unfortunately, I see a lot of absences of the father. And when you don't have that nurturing piece, you know, the nurturing of the mother is one component. And again, we're talking about the whole child. And so they need that nurturing piece of from the womb to the birth. You know, they need that. And it starts in the womb.
It starts in the womb, absolutely. So I believe that the engagement of the father starts while the babies are in the womb.
Absolutely.
How engaged are you? Are you going to the doctor's appointments? Are you massaging their feet? Are you, listening to the heartbeats? Those things will prepare you for the next page. When we go to page 8, it's for delivery, labor and delivery. How were you the whole 9 months, 10 months? Because it's really 10 months, 40 weeks. Gestational period while the baby was developing. Are you singing to the belly? Are you reading books to the belly? I mean, what are you doing to engage in the development of your child while it's in the partner's womb? I mean, you might not be together. That might also be an issue, but how can you pick up? How can you step in if you're not with somebody who is carrying your child? How can you be engaged in that process so it will be easy? It will be a continuous, easy flow. So if you can go with me on page 8, we start from birth to 1 year old. The environment a baby enters into is imperative for their growth. Are you and your spouse arguing in the hospital room while during labor and delivery? We see on TV these theatrics about what really goes on in labor and delivery. And I remember that we have a funny story for everything. My OBGYN for our first child, Dr. Henry in Texas, in Fort Worth, Texas. He's a clown. He's very seasoned in this field. I think he's been delivering babies for over 50 years. And so he's like, the first thing he told me was, my girls do not scream. Remember he said that? And I was like, oh, okay. He said, you want the best environment for that baby to come into. And although sometimes you can't control these bodily functions, but he was just adamant about just even the space that your babies enter. So when we had Azariah, there was worship music going on. If you're a believer, if you're not, some nice music that you like, the cultural music. Soothing music. The lights were dim in the delivery room. It was such a calming experience. And all of the women that were on that wing that were his women, they were not screaming and yelling. There was no fussing and fighting. There was no family members that were there that were going to cause you stress. It was such a peaceful delivery, a peaceful birth plan, because it's important how that baby enters the world. There were other women that were screaming, fighting, fussing on the wing, but they were not Dr. Henry's girls, because it was just, he was adamant about how that baby enters the world. You don't want the mother giving birth to a child and she can't stand the baby daddy, and I even hate using that term, and then the baby daddy's mama's in the hallway and they don't want to be there. If they didn't invite me to the birth, you don't want any of those things going on while these children are coming in. Yes, Jessica, Dr. Henry did not play, fully well. You don't want any of those stressors when the baby is coming into, I think it's hilarious that's on Facebook right now. There's these memes coming out and these little videos coming out of all these babies being birthed during this quarantine season. And these babies' faces are like, why did y'all bring me into this world? And during Corona in 2020, it is a testament of how important it is to come out in a peaceful environment. What do you have to say about that?
The environment does matter. I feel like the bonding experience to the next point is very, very critical. But it's something that has to be intentional.
Mm-hmm.
I was intentional about kissing the kids, and giving them a million kisses.
Mm-hmm.
And I was intentional about, holding them and doing the airplane, flying them around the house, thinking that they were heroes from a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
Bonding is something that every parent must do, and they must be intentional when they do that. And so daddies kind of, do their things a little different than moms, but that's okay.
This is when dads can shine, though. Labor and delivery point is like, now dads can really take over with the bonding, because they're no longer just, the woman is no longer just carrying the child. And so in those first few moments, I think it's very important. Women usually do skin to skin, but I also think it's important for the father to do skin to skin, because they've heard our heartbeat the entire time, and now it's important for them to hear the heartbeat of their father.
And sometimes too, with the bonding process, sometimes fathers may feel left out. Sometimes a father may feel left out because the baby under normal circumstances, the babies are inside of the mother's womb. The mothers hold the baby, skin to skin. They bond automatically with the mother, and then they begin to even breastfeeding, and so I can't really have that experience when the baby wakes up in the middle of the night as a father and breastfeed the baby. And so with our firstborn, I had the opportunity to just really wake up and kind of get the whole experience of fixing the bottle, warming the bottle, sanitizing.
I nursed and bottle fed as a rider.
Sanitizing the bottles, and so that's where all of that bonding experience it kind of started for me. And so I think it's important, to be intentional about bonding with your child.
Be intentional. That's good.
Be intentional about bonding with the child, doing little things that you can do. Obviously, men, we can't breastfeed. We can't, like Dr. Henry would say, he had the funniest sayings. He's like, you can't pay me to have anybody's baby. But I think it's important that as a father you can bond, and I feel like that should be as intentional as it is with the mother.
And so with the next point, bonding, it says, what if I don't automatically feel a connection? When will it happen? If not, what is wrong with me if I don't naturally feel motherly or fatherly? This is such great questions because sometimes it's not an automatic connection. I think, like I said, the TV world, the movie world makes you think that everything is wonderful when the baby come out. What if there's complications? What if the mother had a C-section and she can't see her baby for 24, 48, 72 hours? What if the child is in an incubator? All of these variables can come in and it can affect that bonding. And I say, just wait a second. It'll come, it'll develop, it'll get there. I remember with our JL, our daughter, for the first 6 months, she screamed when Reggie would hold her. And you can talk about how that affected you, but it was like every time I would pass her off just to do something, she would scream. And then, now she's his buddy. But for the first 6 months, it was a hard transition because the baby didn't automatically connect with the father for whatever reason. I don't know what was going on with JL, but she was literally stuck to me like glue. But then also, now that I talk about it, I had a really hard pregnancy with her, from the beginning to the end, from the day I knew I was pregnant to the day I gave birth. I had morning sickness from the beginning to the day I gave her birth. The day I went to our last 39-week appointment, I hurt my sciatic nerve. So it was like, I don't know if she just needed that extra and I was about to say the fourth trimester, but we'll talk about that because that's another point on there. But I don't know if she just needed some more time with her mother before passing her along to her father. And so with that, how was your transition with the bonding? Because it wasn't an automatic connection with you with JL. How did you handle that?
Each child is different. And like my wife said, over time, your consistency will yield the results that you're seeking. Just continue to kiss on her and hug. And even when she would hold her, I would play with her. I would tickle her. I would do different things. And at the appointed time, she came around. But I think, patience and your consistency is the catalyst that will get you and yield you the results, whether you're yielding one, whether you're rearing one child or multiple children. Each one of their little personalities are different. But you have to be consistent. You have to be intentional about that. It didn't bother me. At first it did a little bit, maybe a little bit, and so, but over time it came around, and now, that's my buddy.
Yeah, right. So. Very much so. And so with the next point, transition. What's the transition like from birth, hospital, birthing center, wherever you are, to welcome home? Okay, so you have a whole bunch of help in the birthing center or the hospital. You have nurses there. And so now you're doing it on your own. What does that look like? I think the first thing you need to do is breathe, right? Just breathe. Take a breath. Everybody is transitioning. The mother, the father, the subsequent children, or the children that were already there, the pets. Everybody is transitioning. You got this new little creature at the house. Everything's crazy. The house is not as clean as you would like it to be. Don't sweat the small stuff. Breathe. a lot of our transitions we have noticed is that to not be stressed out is just to literally go with the flow. Take one day at a time. Don't be so stressed about are the dishes clean? The dishes can wait. If you need to wait another 20, 30, 40 minutes just to bond, to transition, to welcome home, to get your siblings acclimated to these new things, it's important to as much as possible go through these transitions stress free.
And let me say this,
Relaxed.
And that's a key. What will help you tremendously in with your transition. That's why it's important for teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
Your team may not be a spouse. You may be single. You may not be married. What is your help team? Who is your
village?
Who is your tag team partner? And be like, okay, mom, let me. Can you take the baby a little bit? Especially if the baby's not being breastfed. Can you take the baby a little bit while I get a power nap? Let me give me about an hour. Let me go shower. Because your wife's body. They say pregnancy is one of the closest things to death.
Yeah.
The body has been under so much intense pressure. And so it's important that I want to make sure that my wife rests. I want to make sure that she recovers. Honey, what is it I can do? You need to, and I would fuss at her oftentimes because I wanted to make sure, because my wife, she's a Hebrew woman. That's a side note, but I had to fuss at her a few times to really sit down and relax and let her know that I was a part of the team and I could do whatever it is that she was thinking that she needed to do after a week or 2 weeks or three weeks fresh out of the hospital, for that matter. I could take that responsibility. I could cook and clean, and I'm an awesome, amazing cook at that. And take over some of those responsibilities. But we've always done all the cooking and different things equally. But it's important in your transition to know that you have to identify your team members.
Absolutely. That's important. Write that down. Identify your team members.
Identify your team members.
Even if you're a single parent.
If that's granny, if that's uncle, whoever you put into place, the translation is, this is going to be my go-to person. This is going to be the person that's going to assist me, so that when I come home and all of these, the dog is going to be happy to see you. The kids are going to be anxious with this new little creature. So everybody, as my wife said, is in transition, and having that solid team in place will help you make that transition smooth.
Absolutely. And don't feel intimidated by not having a village. Now, we have been in places, we have lived in Kansas, Texas, Florida, and the Carolinas, and that we have had children when we had no family members around. And so I even remember when we moved to North Carolina and I was pregnant with TJ. And we had a neighbor that we literally met at the bus stop who is a godsend. She's like family to us now. She was so helpful in our village because we had no other family members here. We did not know anybody other than our neighbor. She was such a great asset to our village. She helped when I was at the hospital giving birth to TJ. She would get the other kids off the school bus. She would, get them snacks until Reggie could, come out of the hospital with me. I mean, she was, so you can find people, you can write here, you can find people that are not necessarily family or friends, maybe neighbors that can help you transition. And so what is the new normal? The new normal, everybody's nervous. I remember having our first son, and I was scared to drive around with him in the car seat because I'm trying to make sure I'm watching around and seeing if he's okay, and driving, because people, especially in Texas and Florida, they drive crazy, and so I was always nervous. And some of you might be feeling nervous being left alone because of the dealings with, and I put that on there, with postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis. Those things are very real. Don't allow anybody to say that they're not real. Postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis absolutely does happen. We hear tons of stories of women who just gave birth who harmed their children, or women who just gave birth and don't feel the same, as somebody who counsels, as somebody who's very educated in this field. It was an adjustment for me for one of our children, and I'll let you talk about that in just a second. When you notice some postpartum depression with me, But just even nursing, I found out that nursing was my best friend. So, with Azariah, I nursed and bottle fed him, but with the next 3 children, I exclusively breastfed them, and it was the best thing. I loved it. I enjoyed it. I breastfed the last 2 till 2 years old, and then the last one till a little over 2. And so, I really enjoyed it, that bonding time. But now you have to understand, you cannot keep saying, what do we used to do? What do we do before the kids came? This is your new normal. You have to adjust to your new normal. New schedules. Like I said, every pregnancy, we were on the same schedule. My schedule, sleep schedule, resting schedule, active schedule was the same. And so our babies were on that. I know a lot of babies come out and people say, well, they have their nights and days mixed up. I'm not sure why that is for them. I can assume that it's because that's the same schedule the mother was on. If she was up most of the night and sleep during the day, then that's why the baby schedule is that way. But, we are all adjusting. So we have to tweak adjustments here and there. If you need to sleep a little longer here, if you need to wake up a little earlier here, all those things become your new normal. And like I said, when you're transitioning, when you're going along the way, you just have to be really flexible in this new normal. Don't be so hard on yourself. Don't be so rigid about, well, I used to get up at 7:30. Now I get up at 6:30. It's an adjusting period. And so with that, do you want to talk about the postpartum depression from your point of view of how, because to be honest, I didn't think that I had it. I didn't think that I was going through anything. I just didn't feel exactly like myself.
For me, it's you transition with each pregnancy, and each pregnancy is different. And, you notice things that, I noticed my wife was different with our third child. And so, I
wonder if it was more environmental than
probably, yeah. Looking back, right? Probably environmentally, your stressors and things that you're going on and dealing with, and again, you can't deviate from making sure that you have an environment conducive to bring a child in. It should be peace and should be harmony. It shouldn't be fussing and fighting and bickering and all of that stuff and all kinds of adverse stressors. I feel like that complicates things a bit too. But she was different, and I felt a little helpless because we haven't really dealt with that with that. That was the only one of the children, and so. I was just trying to be there the best way I knew how, and to be supportive and to try to take all of the workload. And sometimes that meant that I had to take on extra things, but that was okay because I wanted to make sure that she was taken care of and make sure that she, transitioned well, whatever that, we were new, like she was saying, new schedules, new responsibilities, new adjustment. That was a big adjustment for me. I didn't really know how to adjust, other than trying to remove stressors and doing. And so don't feel bad or don't feel intimidated or don't beat yourself up because you don't know, because you don't know what you don't know.
Right. But I feel like if you solidify yourself as a teammate, then you kind of just pick up where there's a slack or there's a need. You kind of, I believe, and then here we go again, even prior to the birth, the baby coming out, we solidify that teammate, that team Wingfield motto, because if I am in need in the area, then he needs to pick up in the area. If he's in need in the area, then I need to pick up, but not be overbearing. I think that is so important as a mother. We are so protective. We are the mother cubs. We are so protective of our children as if they're not their children as well. And so I had to also learn, and we'll get to this a little later in the training, to allow him to parent how he parents, allow him to be with the baby how he is with the baby, and then also allow him to take care of me how he sees that I need to be taken care of, because sometimes I can't see it for myself. With that health, healing, and rest, I felt like I recovered quickly with our children. I had all of our children naturally, and so a vaginal birth, and so there were no, C-section. I was out and about after each child. I'm up eating, talking, walking around, so in your mind, you thinking, oh, I'm good. I don't need to rest that often. No, health, healing, and rest is majorly important because anything can happen. And so like he said, he had a fuss. He had to say, Shanika, sit down. Shanika, go take a nap, go get a shower. I have the kids. What do you need to eat? Because, sometimes we feel like we can do it all, and we can't, and then that postpartum depression can come and knock you out the way, when your normal has been kind of adjusted. You want to say something?
And let me say this, mothers have the tendencies to just kind of pick up
Absolutely.
and just kind of get back into mother mode. When you have that adequate team in place, when you have that contingency plan, if you will, that family plan, the people that you're going to identify to be able to help you heal, help you to health, help you to heal, and help you to rest. I feel like that'll make it better for everybody, because when you want to get up, when you're healing and when you're resting, those checks and balances have to be there. Those checks and balances have to be in place so that you can rest well and so that you can recover well. It's nothing worse than, you trying to, she just gave birth to a baby and she is subjected to all kinds of injuries and going back into the hospitals, infections and different things of that nature. So if I don't allow her to rest well, you can do more harm than good when you're trying to work or try to get back in the routine of things prematurely.
Absolutely. And so I think with the fourth trimester, that goes for women too, which is such a rhema word right now. Just to be honest, the fourth trimester is literally sometimes for the child. And what we mean by the fourth trimester, meaning that your baby wants to be held and loved and touched. So many things, and I put that on here, old wives' tales, nature versus nurture type of things. With the fourth trimester, saying that you can spoil a baby, put that baby down, let them try to figure it out on its own. One thing I have seen in a lot of my schooling is that there's tons of villages in Africa that you don't hear babies crying. And I thought, I was so intrigued by that, Reggie. I went and I researched, why don't the babies cry in the village? And before I read anything, I saw tons of pictures of the babies on their mothers. They were strapped to the front, strapped to the back. So what that led me to believe was that they were always in close proximity of the mother. And so they didn't cry because their needs were always met. I don't know why it is in the United States and American culture that they feel like you just need to put that baby to the side and allow them to, figure things out on their own, which is absurd. We cannot do that. Our babies cry as a form of communication. And so when they're crying, they are in need of something. But when they are close to you, they have everything that they need, right? And so with the fourth trimester, that's good for the children as well as for the parents transitioning. You want to hold and cuddle and smell. We love to smell and sniff babies and kiss on them. Like he says, he does this thing. He says 1 million kisses. Now he's done this with me. He kisses me on my cheeks and he says 1 million kisses, 2 million kisses. He does this with our children. So our 2-year-old, when he comes and kisses me, he says 1 million kisses, 2 million kisses, because he's seen his father do that to me. He's seen his father do that to him. And so with that, he knows to be close. He knows that we're going to nurture him. He knows that we're going to cuddle with him. And so that fourth trimester is so important. So please don't allow anybody, grandmama, great-grandmama, great-great-grandmama, aunties and uncles and daughters, and cousins tell you that holding a baby will make them spoiled. No, holding a baby will give them what they need. They need that. They've been in incubation for 10 months, 40 weeks. They're used to being close. They're used to those warm bodies. So they need that to properly develop.
And let me say, clearly babies can't communicate. They can't tell you when things are wrong. They can't tell you that, they have a poopy diaper. They can't tell you when they need to be changed, if they soil their diapers. So they can't tell you when they're hungry. And so when a baby, typically, generally speaking, if a baby is crying, over the course of these 11 years, our oldest is 11, we can tell you it's for a myriad of reasons. Either they're hungry, either they have gas, either they're tired and sleepy, or
they just want to cuddle,
or sometimes they just need to be a snuggle bugs. That's my our baby boy's TJ's nickname, Snuggle Bugs. He loves to snuggle.
He loves to snuggle.
And so don't think that don't think for 1 minute that, as my wife was saying, that this is going to spoil the child. This is consoling them. This is nurturing them. This is helping them to develop, they need that warm body. Sometimes they just need to be hugged.
And it's okay, and you're not spoiling your child. We have a question on Facebook Live, and it says, when preparing to be an adoptive parent, what is different in the bonding and transition for those parents bringing home an infant to a 1-year-old? I think the same thing. You can go ahead and take him. I think the same transitions and the same things that I would say as I hate to say this word, natural parent. For you guys who the natural and the adoptive parent, but when you're adopting a child that's an infant or a 1-year-old, I would suggest that you do the same thing. You cuddle, you hold, you embrace, you do skin to skin, you get down on their level. If you want to walk around with them like within a kangaroo sack, absolutely do that as well, because it's very important that they get to hear your heartbeat. It's very important that they get to feel your warmth. It's so important because, that is such a stage in our lives where they're learning, they're getting comfortable with who they are and who they're consistently around. And for adoptive children, we know this. They've been in foster care, they've been in and out of the system, they might have been in and out of the hospital, and so they need that safety and that reassurance. And it's so important that you do that. You have, even if you're transitioning from bringing an infant or a 1-year-old with other children in the house, I think you also have to have time with, get your 10-year-old or 7-year-old or what have you, some one-on-one time, of course, with you supervising there with the baby so that they can bond. So they, get your 5-year-olds, put some blocks down with the 1-year-old, let them bond. I think you have to have those same transitional moments with the babies that you're bringing inside of the home. This is not always just for birth children. These skills that we're teaching you today should be interactive, should be, you can transition from a natural setting to an adoptive setting. It's important that you do these same things with your adoptive children that you're doing with your natural children. Sleep. Are you getting enough? We spoke about this sleep train versus the cry it out method. Now, for me, I'm not a fan of cry it out method because, again, this is how our children, our babies communicate with us. And if we're leaving, now I know tons of scholars, tons of seasoned scholars and doctors really promote this. Again, this is just my opinion. I just don't believe the crying out method. I just don't like for children, and this is also coming from my background of protection. I just don't like children, babies especially, to cry for an extended period of time. Now, has anybody ever died from crying? No, but I just think it's important that we do not ignore the cries of our children, because they will get to a place where they even stop crying. I know that might be deep for some, and so that if their natural sense is to cry to get help, and we continue to ignore that, then eventually that cry will stop and they will not communicate to us that they need help. And that's why I don't like the cried out method versus sleep training. Can we sleep train our children? Absolutely. We're still trying to sleep train our 2-year-old because he still gets up in the middle of the night and gets in our bed. And so in sleep training with him, meaning take him out of our bed and put him back in his. That's sleep training for a 2-year-old. Can you sleep train a 4-month-old? Let the babies do what they need to do in these stages. You adjust to them until they can adjust to you.
And over time, I think you'll kind of, I think over time you'll kind of, and especially parents with multiples definitely can identify with what I'm about to say. Over time, you have like an internal checklist. Mm-hmm. Okay, the kid's fed. Okay, the kid may have, a gas bubble. Okay, I've given them gas.
Right with the gas bubble.
I've given them gas medication. The baby might, especially if the baby is tossing and turning and really is not being comfortable. You start to be able to pick up and identify and quickly assess. The quicker you assess what's wrong with your child, the quicker your sanity can return back to you.
Absolutely.
Right? Because it's nothing more frustrating than when a child is crying and you've gone through your internal checklist. Okay, fed, check, clean, check, gas medicine, check, and they're still crying and fussing. Then at that point, you may need to hold them and rock them to sleep. Yeah. Right. So again, it's so very, very important to know these internal steps that you go through. And it's also important to know that, as my wife said, I'm not really an advocate of crime. We try to figure it out as well. So just people, different strokes for different folks.
Right.
But I think what the big point is that, I feel like that's their only form of communication. And so,
and how dare we get them to a place where they ignore their own internal alarms? Right. And even with adoptive children, foster children, I really don't recommend you doing this, because we don't understand the level of trauma that they've been through in their lives. Some of them don't even cry. So how can we assess their needs if they're not crying, if they're not communicating with us, and they can't communicate with us what they need? And so go ahead.
And there is a medical condition, and I actually had a kid on my caseload who had RADS, and I cannot think for the life of me what it stands for: reactive attachment
disorder.
Reactive attachment disorder. And what that is that is developed through a child that is not held or consoled. There, like as my wife said, that condition develops from the lack of nurture. That condition develops not held and not being consoled, and they get accustomed, exactly what she's saying. They get accustomed to internally suppressing and dealing with their own emotions, and they can't deal with life. And so
let me say this. So if they're already dealing with a RAD as a child, can you imagine them dealing with RAD as adults? That's why we raise them to leave. So go with that. How they transition to that.
And so what that translates in is superficial relationships.
My God.
they don't have the ability to form meaningful relationships.
That's good.
They can sweet talk you. They can say all of the right words. They can whisper sweet nothings in your ear. But here's the thing.
They're asking for the word. I'm going to put it in here while you
talk. Right. I'm sorry. They're asking for the thing. They're asking. You cannot. A person who has learned to suppress their emotions, don't expect for them to form meaningful relationships. They're highly manipulative, and the kid that I had on my caseload, he was very intelligent. Like his IQ was like off the Richter scale, but. Again, all of the relationships are superficial. All of the relationships that they come in contact with are meaningless. And the family that had the kid, he was an adoptive kid, and they really, really struggled. So it's so important from the womb that you do that from the beginning, to hold them, to nurture them, to console them, because we don't want to create a monster. So for the lack of a better term, it's nothing more dangerous than an emotionless kid who is highly intelligent. So I'm gonna let that sink in and register for a minute.
That's really good. I know we're at birth to 1 year old, but this is important, because if we're not doing this between those stages, then they'll be seeing Reggie, because you have to develop those things that they can have sympathy, and they can be empathetic, and that they can have emotions. But if we constantly make them suppress those feelings, we have a hand in them being having RAD at 13, 14, 15 years old. And it's so dangerous. And even like I said in the beginning, we raise our children to leave. So if we don't nurture them, if we don't cuddle with them, if we don't love on them, if we don't consider that fourth trimester and giving them what their needs are, then at 20, 21, 25 years old, they don't have many relationships, or they might be married, and they might be married for 45 years and then get a divorce because they have been emotionless with their spouse. So it has a myriad of consequences if we don't deal with this at that birth to 1 year old.
And then if we don't do that, the reality of it is they're going to be they're going to penetrate some type of level of criminal justice environment. You will be, and my wife, I work closely alongside the Department of Social Services. We have caseloads, mutual caseloads, and, they're trying to, we're collaborating, and we're trying to figure out collectively how we can, put a service in place that would adequately address the needs of the child. Because if you go back, everything and a lot of these children that come in and penetrate the criminal justice system, it starts at a very young age when they're young. And you begin to look at a lot of their social history. You can see it as a criminal justice professional, as a department of any social services field. We like to go back and look at when this started. When the child was very, very young, you can identify when the behavior started. And so I think it's important, as my wife was saying, it's so important to know, if you don't deal with those things when they're at a young age, if you don't provide the nurture that they have, that they need at a young age, it's a high risk factor as it relates to the Department of Juvenile Justice, and they're more accessible, or they're more subjective to penetrate the criminal justice system. So.
Absolutely. And let me touch on old wives' tales, and then we can move on. I know you have a few points. We have to be mindful of old wives' tales as well. And I want to be culturally sensitive. I know there's a lot of cultural things that we do with our children and infants and 1-year-olds. Like, for the African American culture, a lot of us don't cut our kids' hair until 1 year old. We've decided not to cut our baby boy's hair because it just fits his personality. So those types of cultural things that don't harm the children are probably typically okay. But if you're doing some things that are not, I will really just be mindful of those things. I know one old wives tells, don't put a baby in a mirror, because some of these things are just absurd. Don't scare a baby or they'll stutter. These types of things, although it might seem playful and harmful, it's just really, I have heard, or even giving baby cereal at 2 and 3 months so they can sleep longer in the night. Before, we didn't have medical research to say the kidneys weren't developed enough for the babies to not able to handle those types of nutrients in our food in their body at such a young age. Now we do. So if you hear grandma saying, "Oh, go give that baby some cereal, give that baby some collard greens or cornbread and mix it in their bottle," at 3 or 4 months, it's really not healthy. I understand you're trying to get sleep. I understand that you're trying to let the baby sleep a little longer, but you have to really follow the instruction of the doctors, the nutritionists. All due respect to great grandma and grandma, they don't have medical degrees, and what worked for them might not work for you. But I don't know about you, but I don't want to give my baby cereal at 3 and 4 months and their bodies can't handle it. And so we have to just be cognizant of old wives' tales versus suggestions. And then that's one more thing, and we can move on. You're going to get a lot of suggestions. You're going to get a lot of unsolicited suggestions from family, friends, people at Walmart or Target. You really have to filter those things through some wisdom. Should I take it? Will this be beneficial for my children, my family, my spouse? If they are, then use them. If they're not, then throw it out. I don't know about me, but I don't ever remember getting unsolicited suggestion. Maybe I wrote "Don't try me" on my forehead when we went out with our children, but people really didn't. So you just have to be mindful. Don't let family and friends stress you out about raising your child. If you want to do something different with your child from birth to 1 year old, then do it. If it's helpful for them, if it's helpful for your family, your team, then do it. If people don't understand it, that's for them not to understand. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. So you have to know what's best for you, what's best for your children, and move on that way. It gets me when I see a lot of new time mothers, families saying, "Well, my mother is telling me to do this." My mother said, "Well, it worked for me." It's also okay to say, "Mom, I know I'm new at this. Dad, I know I'm new at this, but I want to try it this way. I want to do it this way."
So to her point, it's okay when you're new. When you're a new employee, you make mistakes, right? When you're just first learning how, the responsibilities of learning a new job, there is some room for error. So with that, it's okay to err. It's okay to make mistakes. In fact, we all learn from the mistakes that we've made. I consider myself a seasoned a veteran as it relates to children and families. But the reality of it is I don't know everything. And I constantly try to learn new skills and new things. And no one is above making a mistake, even seasoned people. So let me just throw that out there. But as a new mother, critically, and you know, it's critical. It's important to understand that it's okay to give yourself a margin of error, because you're going to make some mistakes. You're a new parent. It's almost expected. You know, don't allow anybody to dictate or tell you how to raise your child. Respect the wisdom that from people that are around you. But at the same token, it's okay to say, like my wife said, you know, Mom, you know, you did this. I want to try something new. You know, there's new research out there. I've been researching. I've been studying. I've been talking to some.
I just want to try.
I've been talking to some other people, and it's like, wow, you know, they're saying that they got getting some pretty good traction from something that they've done. You know, let me test the waters a little bit with this. So it's okay to allow yourself to have a margin of error.
Absolutely. And so if everybody's good, we're going to continue to move on. We're going to probably, if you have some questions, please go ahead and type those in the comment sections on the YouTube channel or on Facebook. If something that we've said that has sparked a question or a suggestion or a comment, please do that. So if you can go with me with page 10, we're talking about 2 to 3 year olds, the training years. I think this is so good that we call this section the training years, because we definitely see it with our own children, especially in this stage. And it says the level of understanding during this stage is increased. The level of teaching at this stage should also be increased. This is also the stage where parents, mostly mothers, develop an unhealthy codependency with their children. Parents need to raise children to leave the home. Again, learning to be independent into adulthood begins at this stage. We often hear that our 2-year-old speaks so well. And so I don't give credit to just naturally us. You know, I say because we've always spoken to our children as if they're adults. And I'm not meaning having adult conversations. So if they ask us something, even at 2, no, please use your words. This is a cup. Do you need something to drink? Ask mommy, can I have something to drink, please? And so those modeling types of things we have always done. And so, like, even if one of our kids called water walkie, and we thought that was hilarious. And every time we would say water, they would say walkie. So we just we just let them say walkie until one day they started saying water, and then that was it. But we allowed them to be developmentally on target in children, but we also pull them up to, we have to train them to leave the home. So they can't go out in kindergarten calling water walkie. They have to be in kindergarten and say, can I have some water, please?
I'll give you, if I'm gonna say, I'm gonna go on a limb, and I'm gonna say, at one point in time, if you've not done this, at some point of time as a parent, you will. Have you ever been in a situation where your kid was fussing and you knew what they wanted? But as my wife's saying, in order to develop them on target, you can teach them how to talk and communicate what they want. But I feel like as parents, a lot of times what happens is we, in order for them to stop fussing, we'll just go ahead and succumb to whatever it is that we know that they already wanted initially, and we'll just give it to them without making them
work for it.
without allowing them to work for, or to have them articulate to their level, tell us exactly what it is that they want. So I
remember, this is the training years.
Absolutely,
the training years.
So researchers out there that kids typically develop most of their development, by age 3. They're everything is pretty much hardwired by that point in time. So parents, you're not oftentimes giving these highly intelligent walking humans, little people, these walking highly intelligent human beings, enough credit from time to time. And so we, as parents, instead of them fussing, we'll just go ahead and give them the cookie, or go ahead and give them the snack, or go ahead and give them the cup of water, instead of saying, tell mommy what you need.
Right.
Tell daddy what it is that you want. And over time, by modeling that type of behavior, you will be surprised. If you were again, from the beginning, I've always said your consistency will yield you the results.
Yes.
Your consistency every single time, instead of allowing them to fuss and scream, you allow them to tell them what exactly it is that they want or need. and you will yield the result that you want.
So mark that off the list. Say no to baby talk. Attach real words with their request. Like all of our children from the beginning, they say sir and ma'am. Now the baby boy, we have to consistently remind him, say ma'am. Now if we call his name, he'll say ma'am, sir. Sometimes he'll say huh, and we correct him. All the older three, they picked it up quickly. Because you know how they picked it up is because we modeled it to them. So when they called our name, we would say ma'am or sir to them until they realized that they had to say it to us as well. And so you have to say no to baby talk. Don't speak with your children goo goo gaga at 2 to 3 years old. These are the training years. You're training them to have full conversations. You can sit down with our 2-year-old and have a full adult conversation. And he now it might not make sense. Like I said, TJ, do you need to go use the potty before we leave? He'll say, Mommy, I used the potty yesterday. And so it's like, yes, you used it yesterday, but you have to use it again, which is funny. But we'll get to that.
And let me say this, when it's developmentally on target, we're not saying that there's something wrong with gibber talk. Listen,
right, absolutely.
I can do a mean gibberish.
Yes.
We have 4 children together. And so, I've had the pleasure to gibber, speaking gibberish with all 4 of them. And I would say to them, I was like, you didn't know Daddy understood gibberish, did you? And I would do my gibberish thing. And so, that's okay. But again, when you're trying to allow them to say something, or if you're trying to promote them to conversate and articulate what it is that they want or need, you model that behavior by having them, tell them versus doing the gibberish.
So the first point on page 10 is stop saying what they can't do or what they are too young to do. This drives us crazy, right? And so it drives us crazy because these little humans are so capable of doing so many things. And in these training years, it also relieves you of more responsibility. So what that meaning is, our 2-year-old knows where the snacks are. We leave snacks in the pantry on the bottom shelf where it's accessible to him. He has to ask permission, but he can go in and get it himself. If I'm doing something, reading a book, watching TV, using the restroom, and he says, Mommy, can I have a snack? I say, absolutely. He can open up the pantry door. He can get him an appropriate snack, and he'll come and sit down on his little napper. Because I don't say he's too young to get a snack by himself. No, we have taught him to ask for permission and then go get it himself. We're raising them to leave the house. They cannot always be dependent upon our on our help for every little thing. Like I said, codependency is the unhealthy codependency on not allowing them to be them.
And let me be honest, I, as a parent, I had a hard time with this.
Oh, yeah. Talk about the birth feed.
after several kids. Although I've always bird fed all 4 of my children.
Mama's bird,
right? But that's been my thing. My wife would try to feed them and they wouldn't eat it. When I bird, I was like, "Girl, you sleeping on this bird feeding?"
He literally bird fed the kids.
I would chew the food up for them and they would tear it up. But when my wife started allowing them, now the first one, especially with Azariah, our oldest son, when she started allowing him to be more independent, we're prepared to feed himself. It literally drove me crazy.
Yes, you weren't ready to transition,
and I wasn't ready. But as we had more children, I kind of gave them that freedom, because for me, again, as a parent, it was easier for me to feed him. And listen, like I had to clean up. A 6-month-old can't clean up, or a 1-year-old can't clean up behind themselves, or a 2-year-old, right? For that matter. And so for Dad, and many of you maybe can relate to what I'm saying. For a parent, it's just easier for you to just do it on their own versus to allow them to naturally develop in their different stages that they develop.
Yeah, and so I think it's funny that with all 4 of the kids, he did bird feed our children. I think and then the funny part about it is our children only allowed him to bird feed them. They wouldn't let me do it. And but also like during the transition of, no, he has a fork and a spoon himself. He needs to do it himself because we can't be in school teaching him how to hold a fork at lunchtime. And so you have to allow them to naturally develop. And then when it's not, when although Dad wasn't ready, we have to continually push them along in development. And so that's when I talk about the one-step directions. At 2 and 3 years old, depending on the maturity level of your 2 to 3 year old, they can do maybe 2-step, 3-step directions. With our 2 year old, he can do more. So if I say, TJ, come here, that's 1-step direction. If I say, TJ, go to the kitchen, get a snack out the pantry, bring it back to mommy to open, that's 3-step directions. And so sometimes they can do 4. The older they get, the more step directions and instructions they should be able to handle. But in these training years, 1 to 2, 1 to 3, maybe 4, depending on their maturity level, they can do those directions. But you have to give them the space to do it. Like back with the snacks. You can't say, wait a minute, I'll go get the snack myself and open it for you and put it on a napkin. No, train them now. Say, go to the pantry, get a snack. Now put the snacks out that they can eat. That's not choking hazards, those things. And tell them what to do and then watch them do it. You give them the freedom, the autonomy to say, I'm a big girl, I'm a big boy, I can do this myself. TJ's saying that all the time now. I do it myself. Okay, let me see if you can do it yourself.
And that'll be an awesome time and moment to positively reinforce.
You did a great job. You listened. You followed instructions.
We are all about promoting high fives and positive reinforcement in our household. And it's so funny how intrinsically we were all created. I know a lot of people don't. People will say, I'm like one of those guys, those people that say, I don't really need a pat on the back. But it does something to me when my wife said, you know what, honey, I really appreciate that. You did a wonderful job. And I'm 40 year-old club. And I can still appreciate that. Right. And here's what I found interesting over 20 years working with children and with family, especially at-risk, the at-risk population, right? As part of our training, they would teach us to always catch the kid doing something right. We were accustomed to them doing the wrong things. We were accustomed to them being manipulative. We were accustomed to them to trying to triangulate staff, and that's what they do. But this is what I found. Even when kids who are at risk are highly, highly subjective to criminal behavior and different behaviors, by positively reinforcement, it's like, okay, you know what? Thank you so much for being kind and asking very nicely. Hey, can I have the toilet tissue next, please? It would be something that simple. And what I noticed when I would positively reinforce it, they would come back to me like a little bitty kid and was like, Mr. Reggie, hey, I did it. I said, you know what? I did a good job. You did. So positive reinforcement, and it all kind of ties into what my wife is saying, those 1-step directions. That would be the main opportunity for you to positively reinforcement. Why do we positively reinforce? For them to repeat the behavior.
Absolutely. And this is the same thing for adoptive children or foster children. You have to see where they are. You have to soberly assess where they are. So if they're not able to do 3-step directions, start back at 1 and just kind of test it along the way. Listen, we have an 11-year-old and sometimes we have to go back to 3-step directions with him. Okay, repeat back to me what I ask you to do, where it is, and all of those things. So I think you just always have to, and I think with raising children, you always have to be flexible. So that's the key theme is flexibility. So sit training, we get a lot of questions about sit training because we are pastors and our children have always sat down in church very well. And now with the babies like TJ, he's 2. So, of course, we can't expect anybody just to sit down and not move. We can't expect adults to sit down and move. But like in restaurants, we always get compliments about, and I'm not saying this to say that we are the best. I just want you to understand that it's possible to train your children to sit and be still without electronic devices. We have always had prayer time because I said we are a religious family. We are pastors. So we sit down with our children with prayer time, a Bible study. So they have been trained since they were 2 and 3 year olds. Sit down while we pray. We pray for 15 minutes. Then they can sit down for 20. They can sit down for 30. They can sit down for 45. We just kind of increase the number and to see where their attention span would be. And so that just flows over in all areas. If we're at a restaurant, if we're at church, if we're at an event, preparing them for school because they have to sit down in the desk. So don't ever think that your 2 and 3-year-old cannot sit down for a number of time. They always say the age per minute. So if your child is 2, they should be able to sit down for 2 minutes uninterrupted. If they're 3, they should be able to sit down for 3 minutes uninterrupted, and that's without electronic devices.
And again, any person with multiple children, you know, we have the Wingfield tribe over here.
Yes.
And any person with multiple children, they know and understand the reality of it is, you know, although, you know, we can get them or train them to sit, that doesn't.
Sounds like a puppy, but you understand what we're saying.
But listen to the greater part of it. Developmentally, you may have to redirect them once or twice.
Absolutely. I mean, even with our 6-year-old, he's in kindergarten. I feel like it's not challenging enough. So I feel like I need to start giving him one first grade work because he literally speeds through that stuff in 30 seconds and he wants to go play. It's because he's not challenged. It's not something can he sit down and do something for 45 minutes? Absolutely, when he's being challenged. But if he's asked to draw 18 circles, I mean, he's been doing 18 circles since he was 1. So it's like, so you have to understand what's going on around them to see what's holding their attention. I think we have to get out of, having electronic devices as babysitters. We didn't have it growing up and we're fine. That's what we say. Our children are only allowed to have their iPads or tablets or, Nintendo Switches on Saturdays and Sundays. And that's only if they've done, really well during the week. And so it's because we want them to play. We believe that development starts and begins with play. They're building forts. They take all of our chairs and blankets around the house. They build houses and they read books. They play. They make up games. They do all of those things because children learn better through play. They understand more instructions, directions, 1 step, 2 step, 3 step instructions. If we're going to build a fort, somebody needs to get the chairs. Somebody needs to get the blankets. We need to get our stuffed animals because those are our family members. You learn so much more by play, and so. And
I'm gonna read your question, and then I'm gonna say we're gonna I'm gonna hold that question.
Okay,
Kalia, we're gonna be wrapping up the training here very, very shortly, and then we're gonna allow some time for some questions.
Yeah, it's getting really good. We have so much. We're gonna have to talk faster.
Yeah. So
that's a good question, and we'll talk about
so hold that question. We're gonna answer that.
Thank you.
But she said something that kind of prompted me. Again, don't beat yourself up. You have to what we're saying. Operate in in reasonable boundaries. Mm-hmm. What's reasonable for a 2-year-old? Mm-hmm. It's very really honestly it's realistically unreasonable to expect for a 2-year-old to sit still for an hour.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, this is real life training. We are on the coronavirus stay-at-home order here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and our children are upstairs watching a movie. Our 2-year-old just came downstairs, and so he has to literally redirect him upstairs. Mommy and Daddy's doing the training. When we finish, we'll come get you. Give him a snack, send him back on his way. So, it's unrealistic for us to believe that for a 2-hour training that he doesn't want to come see his parents.
Right.
And so you just have to adjust and be flexible.
But I feel like as parents, we could do a better job because these highly mobile little humans, mobile humans are very, very intelligent. Mm-hmm. I feel like a lot of times the parents, we disable
we limit them.
We limit their, so we pretty much, what's the word I'm looking for? Halt their development because of our own inabilities or because we don't, because we don't really want to deal with it or we don't want to hear the kid fuss or fight. But a lot of times they are very capable. And even with the potty training,
yes, because that's next. I want to talk about potty training.
They are very capable of learning how to do it. Where we miss the mark as the parent, and again, this is my experience, and you guys can definitely type your experiences, with potty training your amazing children as well. But where we miss the mark is we don't have the patience. The kid's ready. The kids have the intelligence. The kid has the intelligent, the intelligent quotient to be able to do it. It's us who are not typically ready, and that's what kind of prevents that progress.
Yes. So when we get this question, when did you potty train your children? All of our children were potty trained at 15, 16 months, fully underwear, out and about all the time. Right. And people's like, really, that age? And I said yes, not because, well, because of two things, because I was ready to do it and because they were ready to do it. And so if your 3-year-old is not ready to be potty trained, but you are, then you pull them up. Remember, you're raising them to leave the house. You're raising them to get ready for pre-K and kindergarten, and they can't be in diapers in pre-K and kindergarten. So you have to pull them up. And so, like he said, sometimes it's our own ability that stifles our children's development and process. So with our oldest, and everybody says boys and girls are different. Yeah, and every child is different. That's why that's on page 11. Every child is different. You will raise each child, discipline each child differently according to who they are, according to their personalities. We'll get into that later on, but every child is different. And so with our oldest, I don't know why, I just decided to do it. So I brought a little potty. It was a little Prince potty. Every time he would pee, the pee would get in there and it would sing this little royal song. And that used to scare him. So we had to turn the music off, but he would just sit there on it and watch Sesame Street. And so one day he literally peed in the potty. And then he got so excited, and I was like, oh, let's do it. It really started at maybe for him, I want to say around 13, 14 months. It was just, I let him go free, naked from bottom down. He just had a t-shirt on in the potty in the living room. So I always say, put the potty where you are mostly. So you don't have to run upstairs or run to the nearest bathroom. Put it where you are and just let him get comfortable. So by 15 months, he was completely in underwear. With our daughter, JL, she was dry overnight. And so we would wake up in the morning when she was 1. She started at 1. And so we would hold her little stuff, remember, over the potty at 1 year old in the morning, and she would pee in the potty. And I was like, oh, it's time. So we literally took a couple of weeks. We didn't even buy her a baby potty. She was peeing on the big potty. And we put her in panties. 15 months, she was gone. The little Reggie, I don't even know why. I think just because of the other two, we was like, oh, you're going to hit that 15, 16 mark as well. So we started at 12 months, started getting him used to being in underwear or walking around naked. And then we had the potty right where we were so he can get on it. And so the same thing when TJ came. It was like, listen, all the other 3 were getting on it at 15, 16 month train. Now you go. So they were so little. They didn't even have underwear in their size because typically underwear don't come in until 2T. So we literally just had to roll it down or something because they were already ready. But it was because I was ready. We were ready. So is a transition. Even with that, you have to be flexible with that. So if your child is 15 months and you got to go to Target, so what we would do, we would pee before we leave the house. And then when we get to our destination, we would take them to the bathroom as well. And so depending on how long we were at Target or Walmart, we would make them pee before we left. And so you have to be flexible. We also, even still now, have a potty in our truck. And so if, the 2-year-old needs to pee and we're driving, we literally pull over, get him out, let him use the ride bathroom, put him back in his car seat and keep it moving. You have to be flexible in these transitions. It is possible to train a child potty training before they're 2 years old. When they're 1.5, it's possible, but the parent has to be ready. You have to be ready to do it because it comes with transition.
And let me say this, again, when you're training when you are, let me put it in perspective for you. When you're in school and you're learning math, Azariah, he's in the 5th grade. My wife and I used to enjoy watching this TV show called Are You Smarter Than a 5th Grader?
Are you smarter than a 5th grader?
But every time his math teacher introduces him into a new concept, he gives room for error. I want you as a parent to be empowered and to know that you have to give your child, room for error when you introduce them to a new concept. Mm-hmm. He may not get it or she may not get it, the first few times. I'm going to go back to what I said initially. Your consistency will yield the results that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. Don't let up. You got to work through. Sometimes you got to work through your frustration. Sometimes you got to work through being tired. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you got to work through, wanting to say, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and put her or him back on a diaper. Mm-hmm. Let the cost of diapers and pull-ups be your motivation. Right. We were blessed, and my wife and I, we were fortunate enough that none of the children ever came. We never had 2 kids in diapers
at the same time. They're 2.5 the 3 years apart.
So, that kind of worked out for us. But I believe your consistency, it will pay off. When you're introducing them to a new concept, it's okay to leave a room and margin for error because they're learning a new thing. So they may wet, they may
pee on the floor.
They may pee on the floor. They may
poop on the floor.
They may pee in the and it was so funny when one of the kids first did it. It's like, Daddy, I poop floor.
Yes.
And I said, we
okay. Picked the poop up, got some spray, and kept it moving.
And then we said, and then immediately after that, we was like, no, don't poop on the floor. Took them directly to the potty, and then they would do their business there on the potty. So again, they begin to learn where they should go and where they shouldn't go. But there is that with any new level and in any new concept, I want you to understand that as you're training, as the whole child, we want to convey to the new parents. We want to convey even to the seasoned parent. Always leave margin and room for error so they can grow, and so that they'll get it over time. Your consistency. Always remember your consistency will pay off.
Absolutely. And so the next thing that's so important is schedules. I don't know how many times we've shared this with new parents, seasoned parents. It is so important that your children follow a schedule. Now, do we, have room for flexibility? Absolutely. But our children are on a schedule. And like I said, it started in the womb, but even during the training years, it needs to even be more solidified. So even with the potty training, their bowel movements or their pee movements because of your schedule. If you feed them breakfast at 9:00, well, they might need to use the bathroom again at 9:30, or their nap time is at 10:30. So you want to feed them, let them relieve themselves, and then put them down for the nap. So schedules are so important because children work better with discipline and structure and schedule. Listen, adults work better with discipline, schedules, and in all of these things. It's important that. Go ahead.
And let me say this. Schedules it's the reason why. In our socialization process, that the children are home with the parents for the first 5 years of life. You're preparing them to leave the nest.
Yes.
You're preparing them to be able to use the potty. You're preparing them to be able to, have basic skills and to be able to, cohabitate with other little humans, right? So, I mean, it's so important to know that, when you. From the moment the first time that they're introduced and leave the house, they're automatically put on a schedule. Like my wife was saying, one of the most effective tools I feel like you can use as far as a potty training schedule, we all as human beings have to go to the bathroom first thing in the morning.
Yep, and we use probably the same. If you pay attention to your schedule when you go to it's usually consistent. If you're drinking coffee in the morning, if you have a break between this meeting and that meeting, this is when you go because you done had all this coffee. It's around lunchtime after. So you have to. They have the same little schedule.
Schedule will definitely help you increase your success rates with children. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid to put them in sleep schedules. Put them on potty schedules. We eat at a certain time. We go to bed at a certain time. We go to school at a certain time. So all of those things, everything's on a schedule. So you can incorporate those things with your family and with your children, and to be able to, allow a smooth transition for everybody.
And so the next one is teaching at home. It's so important during these training years that you teach them their name, their first and last name, their colors, numbers, letters, their birthdays. We've had a ton of birthdays, February, March, April, and then our 2-year-old, every time it's somebody's birthday, he says it's my birthday too. And I was like, no, tell mommy when's your birthday. October 4th. And so that's how we started that's how we started to incorporate him learning. But I also am an advocate of learning while playing. So although there are some times where we have like a solid 10 or 15 minutes of instructional time for learning, we learn throughout the day. So if we're watching TV and I say, do you see an N on the TV? Or how many spoons do mommy have in her hand? And he'll count. Okay, so if I'm fixing the kids' plates, he said, can I put their plates on the table? Yes. And so he knows exactly where each kid sit at the table. So we're consistently teaching them throughout our day. Nothing that you have to sit down and be rigid about, or you have to set aside 45 minutes of instructional period. Throughout your day, throughout my day, we're always, and this goes for all the stages, we're constantly teaching them what to do, how to do it with just normal life.
And again, in fifth grade, Azariah is learning um, some pretty what's the word I'm looking for? Some pretty
Complex.
There you go. See, that's why we're married. That's why she's gonna help me. He's learning some pretty complex operations in math. Your order of operations and all of those things. And so, to my wife's point, it's so important to be able to teach them. You can seize every opportunity to teach them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can have a pizza. My kids love pizza. They're the little miniature pizzas. And if I know Azariah is learning, fractions and divisions and things like that, if I cut the pizza in half, I take that opportunity to tell him, okay, Azariah, remember you learned this in school, 2 halves make a whole. Mm-hmm. I'll cut it in half and separate it and put it back together. Mm-hmm. And his little light bulb, he just lights up. So, it's so important to seize those moments, use play, use food, your family
Mm-hmm.
settings, you're sitting at, and the kids will start beginning. What'll happen is the kids will start regurgitating some of the things that you've taught them. You're reinforcing their learning, and you're teaching them at home. It starts at home.
It starts at home, and you don't have to pay tons of money and buy all these different apps. Do you have these apps? Are tremendous and they're really good.
Right.
But we want to give you. I'm going to show you something. That if I can pull it out, because it's right here. That we have used even with training our children, so they were all able to tie their shoes before they started pre-K. And so I just made this. It's literally a shoe with a lace on it. And so I would teach them how to tie their shoe, and then I would just let them play with it, right? So this was Reggie's shoe. So he's 6 now. He's been tying his shoes since before he turned 4. I think he was tying his at 3. And then also with JL, I was teaching her this, but she didn't get it. I had a friend of mine who sung her a song because she loves music, and the song helped her. So if you have somebody else that come in and can teach you something that would better help your children than you can, welcome it, because I didn't even have to teach her anymore because they taught her the song and she did it. So, but the teaching starts at home. It doesn't begin at school. It begins, and you can, like we said, use every opportunity, seize every opportunity to teach your children something that they can pick up along the way. Okay. We already talked about say no to baby talk, attach real words with requests. It's very important that we do that because, again, you're training them to leave. You're training them to get up and go. And then mothers and fathers attachment on page 11. All of our children had a little bit of separation anxiety as babies. It got better at 1 to 2, and then sometimes it came back. They just want their parents. They're consistently with their parents or their caregivers. So don't let that harm you, or don't let that scare you. And it's not always something bad. They just might want to be with their parents.
And even the baby boy TJ, his name is Thomas James. We call him TJ for short. But he, even starting at home, training him at home, that TJ knows at 2 years old, even before that, that when it's time to go upstairs and when it's time to go to bed, mm-hmm. When he's fussy and I say, all right, TJ, it's time to go night. He'll say, and I'll say, tell mommy good night. He'll tell
and wave.
he'll tell mommy good night, and he'll either say, he'll do one or two things. I hold you. Which translates, Daddy, can you pick me up?
Yeah, I hold you.
Right? Mm-hmm. Or he'll say, come on, Daddy, and he'll start heading towards the stairs, mm-hmm. because he knows it's time to go to bed, mm-hmm. at 2 years old and before that. So let me read this quote, and then it says, by the age of 2, children have developed the rudiments of a theory of mind. Mm-hmm. They already know, they have certain processes and everything going on, but by reinforcing and teaching them and going back to the other point, putting them on those schedules, mm-hmm. kids can adjust. It makes life easier for you and the children.
Absolutely. And just remember that every child is different. Every child gets used to the schedule differently. You have to be flexible with each child. One child may learn this way. One child might learn the other way. Like I said, one child got this. The oldest one, Azariah and little Reggie, got my little board. JL didn't. She didn't need it. Somebody taught her a song, and then she got it. And so with that, we have about 15 more minutes before we are finished with the training, but we want to get some questions, and then we'll pick up back on page 12, 4 to 5 years old, the pre-kinder years, and then school age elementary. I mean, it's so much. I didn't realize we needed more time because it's such good stuff. Because I wanted to stop at discipline, but we'll definitely be able to finish everything off for next training. And if you have more questions, we might be able to. So one of the questions were, let me scroll back up. To how do you balance children and ministry?
It's very simple.
Wait a minute. Okay, before you say it's very simple.
I have a simple
Okay,
answer.
you tell your answer first, and then I will come back here with mine.
The simple answer is in essence what we've been talking about.
I guess so.
We wake up, you know, at a certain time. The kids know to brush their teeth. The kids know to wash their face. The kids know to get dressed. They know they're going to eat breakfast at a certain time. I'm telling you, schedules are a lifesaver. Schedules will keep everything in perfect harmony like it needs to be. It will flow, it will operate, and have everything smooth like it needs to be. So the simple answer is, and my wife can certainly add, she can add anything that she would like to add at that point. But the simple answer is to, always adjusting. They get up at a certain time. They know to brush their teeth at a certain time. They know to, bath time. All of those things help keep things flowing and moving. And even out the door, the kids are assigned to certain bags. Okay, you get this bag. JL gets buddy. Somebody gets JL gets the diaper bag. So all hands on deck in the Wingfield house, right? So it's funny. Side note, it was so funny. I said one of the reasons why I look forward to having children is because my mother, when she would raise us, she'll be cooked and clean the house, and she's tired, and she's ready to sit down, and she'll sit down on the couch and say, "Reggie, go bring me some water." So you got some. You have 4 mobile helpers, four mobile assistants to be able to help manage the things in the household and then make it run like it needs to run.
You're so silly. And so for me, it's like that ministry in church is all I know. And so with my children, that's all they know. So we don't play in church. That was how I was raised. You do not play in church. Church, you're going to learn about the Lord. You're going to sit. You're going to act like you have some sense. And so with that, I think that just spilled over with our children because I was raised in church. And so our children are raised in church. But also we have church in our home. So it's no different if we're praying and worshiping at home. This is how you should be at church. And so even for us, like if we're invited somewhere, if I'm going somewhere to sing, and I don't have the children, somebody is watching our children at home. So we can go to ministries or churches and do what we have to do without our children being there. But if our children are there, they know to sit down. And then we also have the flexibility of knowing their children. And so that's always there. Are they going to sit? Are they going to put their feet in the chair? Are they going to turn around 20 times?
Absolutely.
Yes, you have to be flexible. You cannot be embarrassed about children being children. They will be children because adults are going to be adults. They're going to get up, go to the restroom. They're going to look around. They're going to get bored. They're going to be like, I'm ready for a snack. And so we allow our children to be children by giving them but also keeping them at a standard that we require of them. Just like we said, stop saying what they can't do. Children can do whatever you require them to do. They can do whatever you train them to do. They can be whatever you tell them that they are. And so if we can tell our children, oh, you guys did great, our children can regurgitate everything we preach about or sing about because they're paying attention, because we require it of them. So I would suggest to many of the parents, it's just to require a little more out of your child. Pull them up. You're training them to lead. You're training them to go to the next stage of development. So if they're 2, every Sunday, they shouldn't be getting up, running around the church. They should, if they're doing that this Sunday, next Sunday, let's give them a coloring book. Get a little blocks, put them on the floor the pew, and let them stack those blocks up during church. We have to accommodate them. I think the thing is flexibility and allowing them to be children, and then pulling them up to where they need to be.
and
another question.
and also, giving them that, as I was stating, when you're introducing a new skill set, when you're giving them something, a new concept to learn, as the parent, as the teacher, there has to be a margin of error and a margin of flexibility and patience. So it's so important. I think oftentimes parents forget
that their children.
I'm gonna share this with you all. It's I know people who expect for a 2-year-old to sit down all the day long and not and just.
We know people like that.
We personally know people like that. Mm-hmm. I'm here to tell you, as a 20-year veteran in the game, it's unrealistic to expect a little human, a little ball of energy, to sit still for a long period of time. Like my wife was saying,
it's hard for adults to sit down for a long period of time.
I don't know about y'all, but I've had to sit through some rugged trainings, and
y'all sat through this meeting. I was like, shit, we have taken a break to get up and walk around.
So we get it. So we need to practice what we preach, right? But understanding the realistic expectation of your child, you understand the limits of your child. Don't expect your kids to get A's when you know that their best is C's and B's. Mm-hmm. Right. So being soberly assessing, being realistic of where your child's at, where, can you push them? Can you stretch them? Absolutely. If you know that that's not your child, that's not your child's best, push them to be better.
Okay, push them. Okay. So we have another question, which is a good one. It says, with potty training, how do you balance them learning and getting it with working a full-time job for both parents, which means you have a sitter who may be inconsistent with your training them? So let me say this, with JL, we both were working full time. And so he was working at, was it Falkenberg? Yes, I think it was Falkenberg. And we were both at Bay
Area.
Yeah, so I was a counselor and he was working, and we were both at the same company. He was a case manager, I was a counselor. And so with JL, so she had to go to daycare and a sitter. And so I just think you have to, first thing is reiterate out of your sitter what your desires are, and then just follow up with her. So he or she has to have some level of accountability with you. So she went to the bathroom. So and I know you personally. So if you want, I can help you with this, Keandra. Just getting a checklist. Like I have these lists, these schedules that I have for the daycare that I have. So at 3:00, pee or bowel movement. 2:00, dry, those type of things. You have to have your accountability with your sitter. It is possible with both parents working for you to potty train your child. You have, like we said in the morning, if they're dry all night, start potty training them in the morning. When you get home from work, you potty train them in the evening. Whoever has them during the day, if you have a sitter who doesn't want to do it, then you're going to have to do it outside of those hours. It might take a little longer. I know there's these 3-day methods that a lot of people have had success with, but if it takes your child 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, then let it be. So if you have to train your child in the morning, Monday through Friday, and in the evening, Monday through Friday, and then all day Saturdays and Sundays, then you do it until either your babysitter can be more helpful in that area, or you just simply do it in those times that you are with your children.
I'm gonna point you back to the schedule.
To the schedule. Right? The schedule.
What my wife is saying is instrumental into ensuring success. Your babysitter should be your reinforcement.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. And usually a good babysitter, or even when you're transitioning your child to like some type of daycare facility, mm-hmm. you require them to indoctrinate you with that level of what do they do at certain times. And then making sure that it's going to be a good fit for what you desire, mm-hmm. as the parent, as you're relinquishing temporary, them to be the caregiver for a certain period of time. Mm-hmm. I potty train my child at, I put them on a potty at such time.
Can you do this here?
Can you reinforce this here?
Mm-hmm. Or here's our schedule, our potty schedule. Can you do this at your home?
Can you implement these things with my mm-hmm. child? Mm-hmm. and kind of make the determination from that point to say, well, you know what, if they cannot accommodate their schedule, they're like, well, no, not quite, but mm-hmm. we do something very similar. If you're okay with that, then go ahead and roll with that, So, but I think, they are there to pretty much reinforce reinforce what you're doing at home. If not, then, like my wife was saying, what I would suggest is that, you take some extra time. Is it a way that you can, put them on a potty before you leave for work?
Mhm.
And then, you're intentional when you put them on a potty, at some period of time after you transition back home. They eat dinner, and then you'll have that opportunity to put them on a potty.
So the rest of the evening, just let them go free and potty train them. Then
You'll have them on the front end, I feel like, and then in the back end to be able to allow them to still, you can still accomplish what you need to accomplish.
Mhm.
Consistency is going to be your best friend. Your consistency,
consistent.
your consistency will pay off.
And then also your babysitters, and this is generally speaking, should pick up on what you do. So if you're dropping them off at the babysitter's house in the morning, so maybe you need to allot an extra 10 minutes. So when you're dropping them off at the babysitter's, you can say, okay, let's go use the potty before mommy leaves or daddy leaves to go to work. And then when you pick them up, okay, let's go use the potty before we get in the car to go home. I think once the babysitters start to see what you're implementing, then they'll also implement that as well. But then you also just have to have a direct conversation with, this is what we're doing at home. We would love for you to support us in this training at this time. It may look different than you. Then be also flexible in how they do it. If they do it differently, then that's okay. When JL was going to the sitter or daycare, she was going to the sitter and daycare. She did both. They did it differently than us, but it worked. And it didn't counteract what we were doing. So it just kind of went together. And so, yeah, there you go with that. I think we have another question. What if the child is still peeing in the bed at an older age? What are ways to train them? Good question. Good question. So let me say this again. Be flexible. I know culturally, a lot of African Americans will punish, whoop, and I'm saying and fuss and fight. Listen. If you understand that you can have nighttime wedding up until 10 years old. So it's normal. Day training and night training are two different types of training. And a lot of people don't tell you that. When you potty train, is potty train for the day, is potty train for the night. That's why I just said previously with Keandra, if you're both of the parents are working, you can still train because there's different times. So our oldest was trained, he was trained all day, and then at night, this is what we would do. Team Wingfield, every night we would go in at midnight. I would go on one night, he would go the next night. We would switch back and forth, and we would put Azariah on the potty. We would say pee, he would pee. Now, this is another suggestion. Do not turn on the lights. Do not do a whole bunch of moving around. We had the potty by the bed. We took him out of his bed, pulled his pants down, say pee. He peed, and we put him back in the bed. We did that for a few weeks, right? And then he started to just sleep through the night without having any accidents. And then he got to an age where he could get up himself to go pee. Did you want to say something?
And also one of the effective tools that we used to help facilitate that was we cut off liquids at a certain time.
Yes, at 6 o'clock. We cut off the liquids at 6.
Kind of, and again, everything pointing back to scheduling. I love that. That's amazing, right? Schedule that around, what time do I normally fix dinner for my family?
If that's later for you, then that's at least an hour or two before they go to bed, cut off their liquids.
Right. So, cut off the liquids, let them eat dinner. Obviously, they're going to drink liquids before, with their dinner. And then, you'll right immediately after dinner, you'll let them go to the restroom, and you'll take them again before they go to bed. So that was one of
that still works for us.
That was one of the really effective tools that we use in order to, make sure that their bladders are empty before they went to bed. And then, they would be dry in the middle of the night. And like my wife was saying earlier, we all would typically go to the bathroom in the morning.
Mm-hmm. And so with Azariah, with JL, she was trained during the night at first. Remember I said when we would wake up, she would be dry. So we put her on the potty in the morning. So naturally, we didn't have to pick her. We didn't have to go tag team at midnight every night because she was already dry. And then even now, if she literally wakes herself up and go pee in the middle of the night, and she's fine. Now with little Reggie, that's why I said I'm glad you asked this question. So with Reggie, he was day trained, and then he was even night trained. And then all of a sudden, maybe this started last year, about 4 or 5, I think after pre-K, he would start having accidents in the middle of the night. And we was like, where did this come from? So we would do the tag teaming at 4 and 5. The tag team, and he would get him up, and now he's so heavy to get up because he sleeps so hard he doesn't wake up. He doesn't feel his bladder full to wake up to go to the bathroom himself. So we had to wake him up. And then, so we would see if he's consistent with being dry. And then if he had an accident again, then everything would be wet. And I would wash the sheets maybe 3 or 4 times a week. But it wasn't bothering me to wash the sheets. What bothered me was that his morning was hard if he woke up and knew that he was dry, because he would wake up and say, I just don't know what happened. And so I said, Shanika, go get him some nighttime underwear. So we didn't call them diapers. We didn't call them pull-ups. It was some nighttime underwear. And so even at 5, and, we had, okay, put your nighttime underwear on. And so, because if he had an accident, it would be in his nighttime underwear, not all over his sheets. And then it wouldn't affect his day, because I didn't want him to wake up. He's fully clothed. All his clothes are, wet. All his bed is wet. And then he's thinking about this all day at school. So I didn't want him to do that. The nighttime underwear, we put him on him. And if he had an accident, it was in there. So we didn't have to pull the sheets off. We didn't embarrass him. He wasn't embarrassed. And then, so when he's consistently dry with the nighttime underwear, we just take them off. And then he's back in his underwear. And I think maybe one time he's gotten up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. And then we also have implemented exercises that will help him develop his bladder even more, so he can hold his pee longer than that. So hopefully that answered your question. And like I said, I think we think in our mind, once they're fully potty trained during the day, that nighttime is not an issue. Nighttime can be an issue up until 10, sometimes 11, 12 years old, because their bodies are still developing. So hopefully that helps you out some more in understanding when the child is older that they can have nighttime.
Absolutely. And I don't, developmentally, spanking or punishing the child
for normal things
is never an effective method. Unfortunately, sometimes our parents and our caregivers, people who were responsible for caring for us, didn't, they only knew to punish.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the reality, after a while, and we'll talk about that later on. I can't wait to get to the teenage years, because that's my I love the kids, mm-hmm. But I've been dealing with a lot of teenagers between age of 12 and 17. That's my group. So you're guys gonna hear a lot more stories and relatable things and conversations as it relates as the kids get older. But I want to say this, and then allow for a couple of more questions, because we're right at the 2-hour mark. We didn't want to keep you out all too much longer, but it's never an acceptable practice to think that beating the child is the answer.
Right, because it's not. You cannot discipline a child into submission with the natural flow of their bodies.
You cannot. You don't have no control over the body. No, like the child didn't have any control over the body. So it's
right. We got to get up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom.
Right. So when your body tells you it's time to go, you just kind of follow suit. But
right.
I mean, your body does that automatically. So again, I'm not a fan. I'm not an advocate of punishing or whipping the kid or things of that nature in order to get them to comply. Because if they truly had an accident, you can do more harm than good developmentally. You'll cause them trauma. Okay, every time I wet myself, my parents gonna beat me. Mm-hmm. That's never. And we're mandated reporters, so
we are mandated reporters.
That's not a good situation. That's not a good look for people who are sworn in to protect these children.
Right. And like families, I said, we want our children to have the best day possible. So if whatever way we can do, if we have to get nighttime underwear and put them on in the bathroom, and then he can run in this room and have his pajamas on and nobody see it but us, for him to have a great day in the morning, then we'll do it. I don't care if he's 10 and is having some issues with peeing in the middle of the night. We are going to do whatever we can to help him transition to the next step in his life.
And let me say this, it's amazing too, because here's the thing, as we talked about earlier in the training, and it's important to positively reinforce when they're knocking it out of the water. You know,
Yeah, because we high five, we give incentives.
If he comes in and he's driving, like, you know what, and we'll say, little Reggie, did you, are you dry? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. I say, good job, son. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm talking about.
And then after a week, you've been dry all week, he gets a special prize. Now he's going to drive us crazy about this.
Oh, yes, indeed. When you tell, that's one thing about a child. When you tell a child, they're going to tell you what you was wearing, everything you said. But daddy, but mama, you said, if I did this. And so it's important to follow through.
And then it helps them also remember your exercises because that helps them to stay dry. So yeah,
you want to positively reinforce so that you can really, again, all positive reinforcement does is to just encourage repeat behavior of the good behavior.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you guys so much for joining the Whole Child Development, Discipline, and Destiny Part 1 training. Part 2 will be next Saturday at 11 a.m. sharp. And please, if you have anybody else who wants to join in, it is okay to join in next week, even if they don't have the training manual right now. They can go ahead and order it, send their purchase copy receipt to the training, the whole child training at gmail.com so we can add them into the private group. So I think part 2 would be great. We'll probably have to talk a little faster so we can get all these things in, but there's such a plethora of information and we might even extend it. And this won't be the last. Again, like I said, we have tons of installments, but thank you guys so much for joining our training today, our first training with the Whole Child. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to ask questions, even in the group. So if you have a question and if you're seasoned, if you're a parent, or if you have a suggestion on how to help another parent, please be interactive. You have the freedom to be interactive in the Whole Child Facebook page and the Whole Child training group. You have autonomy to talk and discuss amongst what you've learned in the training, what you're getting out of the manual, additional questions you want to ask, or you might want some feedback, or ask other parents how they have worked through this, or ask other social workers what to do, how to handle this situation, other foster adoptive parents question. This you have the space to do that. So thank you guys so much again. Did you have anything else to say before we end?
No, I just want to just reiterate, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. And, I hope something was said that can, you can implement or challenge you to kind of do it differently, because we want to empower the parent. You guys are amazing, even through processes, when you can learn how to do certain processes and put things in place. You can say, hey, this is what I've tried. And this is what has worked for me. And this is what has caused me to be effective. And now you get an opportunity to teach the village, right? To impart some knowledge or wisdom or something that you've learned along the way that was beneficial and helpful for you. So thank you guys again so much. I look forward. I am itching to get to this teenage years. I'm telling y'all gonna really, really enjoy it. And if it's anything you think about from now until Saturday, please feel free, like my wife said, to answer that question or have questions ready for next week. And then we will presume next Saturday, the 9th, at 11 o'clock. All right. Thank you guys so much and have a great day.